like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, heck, we're even on TikTok. We're excited to engage with you. We hope you'll join us moving forward.
Good morning, everyone. It's Andrew with The Market Mindset. Today, we're speaking with James Turk, who's the founder of Goldmoney. He also writes a number of books that you can buy as well, perfect for this time, and we're going to speak about one of them, but also notably the free Goldmoney report, which is the successor to the free market Goldmoney report that he began back in 1987 as a subscription-based investment newsletter focusing primarily on precious metals and national currency. Goldmoney is one of the world's leading provider of physical gold, silver, platinum, palladium for private and corporate customers, allowing the easy, practical purchase of metals online. Through Goldmoney's non-bank vault operators, physical precious metals can be stored worldwide outside of the banking system in the UK, Switzerland, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Canada. They have over 20,000 customers and hold over $1 billion in precious metals in partner vaults. He's written the book Money and Liberty: In the Pursuit of Happiness and the Theory of Natural Money. In the book, he makes the clear distinction between money and currency, and it's important to understand that difference. Words have meaning, and truly understanding the definition of a word matters, especially nowadays when we see that corporations and government can change meaning of words very easily to fit a product, to fit a solution in any way, whether it means unemployment numbers, whether it means what vaccination means. They can do this now quite simply. So one has to understand the words and define them clearly when you're wishing to speak to them, when you're wanting to debate about anything. And today it's too easily, we assume that a lot of words mean the same thing, like assets or value or money or currency. All of these have very distinct differences, although there are similarities. And it's important that we understand what we're talking about, because all too often people interchange words, kind of assuming they mean the same thing because they're in the same category. And it's a very key distinction. And this is a very interesting, insightful, and philosophical discussion in his book. So we're going to talk about a whole bunch of different things, but mainly what his outlook on gold is. What are some things we can look forward to in the year? Some of the challenging things. It's going to be an interesting and deeply thoughtful conversation. I'm really looking forward to speaking to James Turk. Good morning, James. How are you doing? Glad to have you on The Market Mindset.
Yeah. Hello, Andrew. It's great to be with you. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, I think we're going to cover a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of nuances, and what used to be maybe more like interesting or curious or philosophical nuances, which today are distinctly necessary. And we must be clear and concise about specifically words that we use. And what was the driving force behind Money and Liberty: In the Pursuit of Happiness and the Theory of Natural Money? Because this really touches on a lot of major themes that I think young people in particular must pay attention to, and then my generation older need to be reminded of.
Yeah, I have two boys. I have two children, and I wanted to make sure that they benefit from the knowledge that I've accumulated over 50 years of international business and finance. And so I sat down and started writing things. And then as I got into it, I thought, well, since I've written books before, I might as well make it a book and make it available to anyone who's interested in understanding the link between money and liberty.
You make a big distinction throughout the whole book, and it's a key driver of the book, between currency and money. Now, I don't want to give too much away, but maybe you can kind of start there and kind of let people know, here's just one example that we can kind of start the conversation off at.
Well, first of all, money has 4 specific functions, not 3, as most people think. Since the 20th century, when we abandoned the gold standard, we forgot about the 4th function, which is basically that it has to be a tangible asset. Because in the real world, goods and services pay for goods and services. And one of those goods is money, gold and silver. So that's one element of it. Currency, on the other hand, is a word that only came into existence in the late 1600s. It was created because people at the time, as the new banking industry was starting in London, people at the time understood that what they deposited into a bank was money, and what they received in return in terms of paper was not money, but a currency circulating in place of money. It was a currency as a money substitute based on bank accounting. And it's expanded beyond that over the centuries, but it's still essentially the same thing. Currency is a function of bank accounting. It's not money.
Yes, and that distinction, today I think it's so interesting because we get into this world of these NFTs and cryptocurrency and what's an asset there, what's a value, what's on a ledger, and the waters get muddied very quickly. But before we even talk about that world and that realm of what an asset is on a virtual sense, let's kind of just walk through what we're sitting on today then. I mean, we've got a lot of money printing. We've got a lot of Fed spending, and we've got a lot of precarious situations on the rise. Even retail people are really paying attention now to the rise of inflation, and they're looking and scrambling to see where they can find assets that actually have value, that are going to carry some value moving forward. So maybe you can walk us through that.
This week was important. We've had 20 central banks meeting to discuss how they're going to manipulate interest rates and continue the financial repression that they've imposed on the world over the past many years with interest rates near zero, rather than a free market interest rate, which is where they should be. And it's no surprise that inflation is getting worse and worse and likely to get worse, because Milton Friedman said, and everybody's accepted without question, that inflation is a monetary phenomenon. In other words, his point was that if you create too much currency, that you're going to inflate the currency, and that means that prices are going to rise because you're debasing the currency. So here we are in a situation when inflation is getting worse. The Federal Reserve met, the Bank of England met, European Central Bank. The European Central Bank is going to continue and actually expand its bond buying program, so they're going to print more rapidly in the future. The Bank of England raised interest rates from 0.1 to 0.25%, which is not going to do anything to fight the inflation, which here in the UK, by the government's own acknowledgement, is over 5%. It's probably closer to 10. And the Federal Reserve said in the future, they're going to print less fast and maybe raise interest rates as well. So, they're not doing what Paul Volcker did. One of the advantages of being older is you go through a lot of different cycles. And I remember very well the 1970s, which I started my business career in the late 1960s. And in order to fight the rapidly worsening inflation in the late 1970s, Paul Volcker was appointed in 1979 and was given the mission to save the dollar, bring inflation under control. And he did that by raising interest rates. And I was just doing some research on this recently. Federal funds rate, which is the rate that banks lend to each other, was 22% in 1981. That's what was necessary to bring inflation under control. We couldn't afford, the world can't afford an interest rate like that today because of all of the debt and all of the spending that governments are doing, and having that spending being turned into currency by central banks around the world. So we're headed for a big bust up. And it's probably not unlike what happened in America, in the United States, back after the War of Independence. The first currency of the country was the Continental, and it collapsed because of government spending. It was ultimately a hyperinflationary collapse, and that created a lot of turmoil. Even though America won the war, there was a lot of distress, and what the framers of the Constitution decided to do to create a more perfect union was to get together, and they framed the Constitution. In the Constitution are a couple of important monetary provisions. One is that gold and silver shall, the federal government has the power to coin money, not to print money. There's a big fundamental difference.
And maybe walk us through that coining compared to just printing, because that's, once again, it's a nuance, but it's very specific nuance.
Yeah, words mean certain things, and you have to take words at their definition, and you can understand more clearly what the framers meant by that by putting yourself in the context of what they lived through with the hyperinflation of the Continental, as well as the reading the material that they did at the time, their various writings, letters to each other, Madison's notes of the Constitution Convention, and things of that nature. And you understand what they meant by coining money. You could take gold and you could take silver and mint it into a coin. The other thing that the federal government had the power to do was to regulate the value thereof. What that meant was that the government had the power to control the gold-silver ratio, so that there was always a available metal in the country so that you could mint gold and silver coins. Because if one coin was overvalued relative to the other, the undervalued coin would be exported out of the United States to where it was more highly valued. And then you'd be left with a problem because you didn't have the metal to create coinage. If you couldn't create coinage, then you're going to have some economic issues resulting from that. So what this provision, regulate the value thereof, it's entirely different from what people think that provision means today. But it was quite clear to the framers of the Constitution and what it meant and the reason why it was there. It had a purpose. And to reinforce that, one of the first acts of Congress in 1792 was to, with George Washington as president, he signed the Mint Act of that year. And what the Mint Act did, it created the U.S. Mint, which the federal government had the opportunity to do because it had the power delegated to the states to coin money. And in the Mint Act, it says that if you debauch the currency, or if you debase the currency, by mixing base metals into it or reducing its purchasing power in unnatural ways or illegal ways, you're creating a crime against humanity, and it was punishable by death, which is specifically stated in the Mint Act. And here we have central banks around the world, saying that their target is to debauch the currency by 2% or more every year, and they're getting away with it. So what the book does, it goes back and looks at the history of money and how we've evolved, how we came to where we are today, because we've gone off on a tangent and we have to get back on the right road. And I'm hopeful that this book may help people understand, what the world is like today in terms of what it was like even in my lifetime growing up in the 1950s. It's a very, very different world today than it was back then.
I always like to look back at different events throughout history to see how they played out, because people always think that today is terminally different and unique than any other point in history. And yes, you can focus on the uniqueness of today, but there's also a lot of similarities to many other times in history whenever things have gone way out of control, fiscally, as far as value-wise with inflation. And we can see how people have behaved and can kind of get a good sense of what is coming.
It's a point I make in the book, and I use an example of the Bundesbank, the German central bank. After the Second World War, the Allies did not want to have a third world war against Germany. And what the Allies understood was that wars are funded by a central bank creating money out of thin air through the mysteries of bank accounting. So they created the Bundesbank as a central bank, and they instilled in the individuals who ran it, as well as in the Bundesbank law, certain provisions that the Bundesbank was truly independent. What that meant was that the Bundesbank did not have to buy any government debt. And what it meant was that if the government was going off on the rails by spending too much money, the Bundesbank would not need to buy it or turn it into currency. And if the government couldn't sell its debt, then it was able to spend the money. The currency wasn't created out of thin air. And what happened was that because the members of the Bundesbank, after it was formed, had lived through the problems of the currency collapse of the Reichsmark after the Second World War, they had it in their living memory the importance of maintaining a sound currency. And they did up until the creation, let's say until the early 1990s, when by then the new central bank governors of the Bundesbank no longer had in their living memory the experiences after the Second World War, because they weren't old enough to remember what actually happened back then. Then the Bundesbank gave up control to the European Central Bank. And what is the European Central Bank doing? It's doing exactly what the Bundesbank Act prevented the Bundesbank from doing, which is turning government paper into currency. And that's what this bond buying program is by the European Central Bank that they just announced they're going to be expanding it today.
Well, and this is looking quite similar to what we're seeing or beginning points today here. I'll just say the West. We're seeing we're dangerously dancing along a fine line as more and more people realize that massive inflation, and I would say massive inflation, not just the speed of money that they're putting into the system, but I mean, since 2008, I've kind of taken the stance that they never cleared up 2008. So that was a time bomb continuing, ticking away as it went along. And it was massive spending, but it's been completely eclipsed. I mean, it's not even the same conversation, say 2008 to 14, to the last, say, 4 years, which has been so shockingly huge. And that is the biggest wealth transfer I could possibly, probably most all of them rolled into one would be the same amount that's just taken place. And a lot of people, are even general people who don't understand the economy, don't understand finance, kind of see, wait a second, it's not the 1% anymore. It's the 0.0001% has taken from everyone else. And that's kind of, when you look back at like Napoleon times, that's when heads roll.
Yeah, that's what this system perpetuates. To have liberty, you have to be in control of your government. And there are two ways to do that. Voting is only one half of the equation. The other half of the equation is you have to have natural money. In other words, if you allow the government to create currency at will, as much as they want, that currency is going to give them power. They can't create bullets out of thin air. So what they do is they turn to the banking system to create currency out of thin air, which the government can then use to buy bullets. Basically, That's how they have power. So this is something I actually learned back in the 1970s from a speech that was given in 1948 by Howard Buffett, who happens to be the father of Warren Buffett, who was apparently Howard Buffett was a real lover of liberty. In addition to being a successful businessman in Omaha, he did his duty by serving 4 terms as a congressman in Washington. And while he was there, he gave this brilliant speech explaining how liberty and politically honest, politically sound money are inextricably interlinked. You can't have one without the other. And what's happened in many countries around the world today is liberty has eroded because governments have the power to create currency out of thin air and use that currency to the disadvantage of individuals to their own advantage. Because governments are not out there to take care of you and me. They're out there to take care of the bureaucracy that they've created and take care of themselves, however they see it. That's far different from the vision that America was founded on and existed up until the 1930s, when everything was turned topsy-turvy by the radicalization of voting as a consequence of the Great Depression.
And it's so tempting. And I even look, say, I worked at Merrill Lynch. If you look at it from a banking side, or you look at it from a government side, one can easily convince oneself, like, wait a second, no, if we have control of this system, we'll do the right thing. It gives us a lot of tools to work with. So my brain can play with that and even make the positive statements of, no, it's not all bad. This will be good. Because it's very advantageous if you're in that system, that you could easily convince oneself and others that, no, we need to move. This is more modern. This is a much more intricate way of looking at things. We've got all these theories now that we can apply. We should be okay. But at the end of the day, and I don't want to get into too much of a conversation about the different theories, there's still a human behavior factor that functions regardless of what period of time or how smart or whatever theory we're applying, that if you can just create out of thin air, even with the best intentions, there are consequences. Nothing comes for free.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the two theories are very simple. You either believe in Adam Smith, the father of economics, or Karl Marx. Basically, that's what it comes down to.
Yep.
And I'm a firm believer in Adam Smith because I understand how he clearly wrote how humanity advances. That's what the pursuit of happiness is. And that's why I put it in the title to the book. If we're hungry, we eat. If we're tired, we sleep. Every day, every decision we make, we're striving to improve our situation, improve our position, improve our life. And we do it in a variety of different ways. We work in order to generate purchasing power, and we interact with other people. Now, the other person is also interacting in the same way. He's also striving to improve his situation. So the farmer sells food to me and I give money to the farmer. We're both better off as a result of that exchange. You don't need a government to do that. It's just natural the way people act. All you need government for is to make sure that everybody is protecting everyone else's right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness.
And I like how you posted it that way too, because I look at words, say, like contentment or happiness, or any word that is hard for me to think in the morning, I'm going to get to this state. And for me, I look at it as being, there's a whole bunch of actionable items that need to be done. I need to do a bunch of things. And then as a byproduct, I might feel happy. So I kind of look at this as, if I do this, if I work hard, and there's a reason why I work hard. It's not just to toil miserably as a proletariat, as Marx might say, but if I just work hard and I aim towards something, it's for my families, my community, all that, there's as a byproduct, a sense of happiness and well-being because of the hard work towards something bigger and better, and that striving towards something bigger and better, rather than say, what I often hear here is, my freedom comes from the government, or they allow me to do things, or
Yes.
I look to them to support me and help me, which means to give me. That is no road to happiness from at all.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Andrew. It's basically called the American dream. And you could dream whatever you wanted to dream. But generally what it was people would work in order to have a better quality of life and make sure that their children had a better quality of life than they themselves had. And as a consequence, society advanced and progressed. The standard of living continued to rise because of the basic principles of the way economics work as defined by Adam Smith, not by Karl Marx. The government doesn't create wealth. It destroys wealth. It takes wealth away from the productive part of the society and gives it to the unproductive part of the society. Today they're talking about build better or something in America. The way the framers of the Constitution used to do it is that capitalists or entrepreneurs, if they felt that there was a road needed, they would build a road and charge a toll, or they would build a bridge and charge a toll. Even during my lifetime, the interstate highway system, when it was built back in the 1950s, started out in a lot of places as toll roads, because that was the concept of the Constitution. That was the concept of the framers. And, even in the 1950s, those principles still sort of carried their way through. But then it all started changing as the currency started getting destroyed in the 1960s. Political correctness came in. What that meant is that everybody had to conform and follow the leader, their Führer, whoever their Führer happened to be, and do whatever he said you had to do, rather than the individualism and the pioneering spirit that made America what it was as a great country.
I always kind of like the two distinctly different beliefs is that it's a lot easier to lower the standard and to bring everyone down than it is to raise everyone up. So if you're someone in the government, you think, oh my gosh, what a task. If we're trying to raise up the people to help them become much more educated, much more of this, that's an onerous task to take. It's a lot simpler to go, well, if we erode this middle group and we, through media, and we pull them down a bit, that's a lot easier. That we can control. That we know how to do, and we can pull down pretty quickly. And that, once again, as a tool, if one looks at government as being a tool of simply controlling masses of population, right, wrong, or indifferent, is a pretty attractive tool. But
every individual is different, Andrew. Not everybody can be a Michael Jordan basketball star. He has certain skills and talents that very, very few people have of that nature. That's true for, very few people can be an Albert Einstein or any other type of position where people want to work. That's part of the pursuit of happiness. We have certain skills and ideas and tastes and things we want to do and how we want to spend our lives, because our most precious asset is our time on earth. And when governments steal the purchasing power that we work so hard to earn, that's theft. That's why the framers thought it was a crime against humanity to debauch the currency. And that's why the penalty was death, because you were destroying society by taking away people's time, by stealing their purchasing power through debasement of the currency.
And we've seen trillions pumped into the system over the last couple of years. And I think, and I could be getting this wrong, maybe you heard it as well, that they were saying they're going to spend 150 trillion towards new green energy sector. And I'll have to fact check that one. We'll come back to it. But that 150 trillion, that's a number that's so startlingly, shockingly large. You go, well, how do you get to that? Like, that is an astounding number to get to. That to me, I go, well, you could print your way to that, but what is that? Where's the value in it, though?
Yeah, absolutely right. That's even huge compared to the $30 trillion debt that the government already has, and the other 100 trillion of contingent liabilities that the government has. It's still a huge number.
Yes.
So, some of these fantasy ideas that, the government can do everything in the world are just totally crazy. And it's sort of government has become a religion. And it's a failed religion. People just don't recognize it yet. It is not a religion, but people believe it to be a religion.
This is kind of a core concept. When I first started talking to people was, and not to sound patronizing, but we should have a bit more responsibility for our day-to-day events. I live in Canada, so we're pretty left, to say the least, let's just say. And the conversations are often very strange to me because I don't like giving up I'm a control freak. I don't like giving up too much control of my life or liberty or rights or anything. I certainly don't believe that the government has given me any divine right for freedom. It never stemmed from that. It didn't come from that. But that's I'm more of an oddity here.
The framers of the Constitution put together the document with the writings of the Age of Enlightenment very much in mind. What the Age of Enlightenment, John Locke and even Thomas Jefferson was actually part of the Age of Enlightenment. What they were doing is they were rethinking the social contract that had been in place up until that moment in time, which was still basically a feudalistic type of concept. And what the War of Independence did is it changed the world in a very fundamental way. Individuals were no longer the subject of some king. Individuals were now citizens who had the right to life, liberty, and property, and could live their life however they wanted to do that. And it was an entirely different direction and the right direction for the world to move. But now we're going back to what existed, prior to the framers of the Constitution putting that document together, which is essentially a type of feudalism. But it's not neo-feudalism; it's more fascism or corporatism, if you prefer that word. They basically mean the same thing. It's that corporations now control the government. And as a consequence of that, you are following, the dictates of, whoever has the money.
Yeah, and today, they have the added benefit of big data, lots of years of research, both in behavioral psychology and psychology in general, in propaganda, and in a lot of those types of advertising, if you might, or marketing. That the constant stream of discussion, whether it be in a TV show, in music, on ads, or whatnot, they have a big advantage, especially if you're printing the money. Oh, well, you get an unlimited marketing budget to broadcast your ideas and hammer them home in everything. And people say to me, Andrew, I think you're reading too much into things. I think these are not stupid people. These are not. There's big data on everything you could possibly imagine.
So we basically have a choice here, Andrew. We can educate people about the flaws in the present system. We can help, people prepare for an uncertain future. And, maybe we can even sort of direct things back in the right direction if enough people become educated and concerned about the way things are moving. I hope something like that can happen, before we get an economic collapse like the Great Depression, or, God forbid, any kind of armed conflict anywhere in the world. We definitely want to avoid that. But when economies go bad, armed conflict, can often occur. There have been a lot of studies suggesting that the rise of Nazism in Germany in the 1930s was a consequence of the failures of the currency system in the 1920s, and we all know, what happened from that. Yep. So let's hope that people start to wake up. And in that respect, I'm very happy about the internet because the internet really is a useful tool. There's a lot of junk on the internet, but there's a lot of great stuff on the internet. It's giving people access to a lot of different points of view so they can start thinking for themselves, because that's really what it's about. People have to think for themselves. And it gets back to the pursuit of happiness idea. When you're thinking for yourselves, you have a plan to prepare for an uncertain and unknowable future. And that's what we as individuals have to do.
And I like that when you brought the social contract, because when I look back at my readings, when I've done that years ago, it made me think of, okay, let me look at every aspect in the state and in the government situation I live in and go, if I was entering into that contract knowingly, not as a child, I'm born into the country, do I agree with that? Yes. Do I agree with this? Yes. Whichever statement. Yes, yes, yes. No, that one I don't. But those, you literally, I think if someone steps back and looks at today and goes, you've entered into a contract with your government, with your state, or with your province, and let's look at some of the key factors that you believe in. Do you agree with that? And does it sit well with you? And I don't think people, they haven't done that soul searching to go, you're entering into a contract with this group. You don't have to, you don't have to even have it. If you firmly disagree with it, then you have a right to go, wait a second, no, that one I'm very uncomfortable with. Let's have a conversation about it.
Yes. That's very much the thinking of the framers. Everything was structured from a point of view that the way the individual was the person who determined how the society operated. The way I like to describe this is, imagine a waterfall, and at the top of the waterfall are individuals. They then delegated to the states certain powers, which the states then itself decided through the Constitution to delegate 17 specific powers to the federal government. So you have this waterfall with the individual, the 13 states originally, but now 50 states, and then the federal government at the bottom of the waterfall. What's happened in the 20th century, slowly but surely, the waterfall has been turned upside down. And now the federal government thinks it's at the top of the waterfall and the individual's at the bottom. But that's not the way it works. That's not the way the Constitution was written. That's not the social contract of the Age of Enlightenment. I think people don't understand, why they're unhappy. They're unhappy because of the way things have evolved and changed in the 20th century. A movement toward socialism, authoritarianism, fascism, and away from free markets, Adam Smith, and capitalism.
At the end of the day, especially now, I think when we really focus our attention on those positive aspects of natural law, natural money, and freedom, that's a much better energy spent than worrying about a lot of the noise and a lot of the negativity.
Exactly, particularly in Canada, because your natural resources are so vast. I mean, you have natural resources that could, provide resources for the entire world because of your minerals and particularly your gold. So, if we do go back to gold, Canada will benefit from it, no doubt about it.
Yeah, actually, let's just talk about that quickly while we've got you, sure. Because this is a very curious thing. We don't even have gold in Canada, like as far as the bullion. We got rid of it years ago, which I find fascinating, which is one conversation all on its own. But we are such an amazingly mineral and elements resource-rich country. And we have to fight with the country itself. Whereas we have a very similar type of politics in Australia, but they seem to be a lot more open to their resources. It's a very curious situation we've got going on here.
Yeah. Australia, though, doesn't have much gold either. Canada used to have one of the highest per capita gold holdings in the Bank of Canada up until the 1980s. So, you used to be extremely well prepared if there was going to be a change in the international monetary system with gold coming back at the center of global commerce, which I think is what's going to happen as the dollar's role continues to, as the US dollar's role continues to erode and fade away. But now you've got very little gold in the Bank of Canada, but you do have immense reserves, and a lot of new discoveries are occurring all of the time. One of the things that's of interest to me is, being an older guy, I remember the gold mining back in the 1970s and 80s. And in the 80s in particular, there was a new technology that came out called heap leaching. And what it did is it enabled mining companies to start mining profitably gold in areas that the old timers just walked over because they saw it was dirt and they knew that it was uneconomical to mine. And that fundamentally changed the mining industry in the 90s and the early 2100s. What's happening now is, over the last 10 to 15 years particularly, the revolution is occurring in exploration. There are all types of new techniques now that enable companies to find gold that previously was not located or easy to locate. Just looking at how mining came into being, first it started with gold in streams, then it was gold outcrops, follow the outcrops into the earth. And then you started using other techniques like heap leaching to, sift through sands and stuff to pull out the gold. What is happening now with the new technology is they're able to find gold in places, and silver too, that they never considered before. So if you look at like Newfoundland, some of the huge discoveries that are occurring there, or in the Golden Triangle, not too far from where you are, in the BC. This is, I think, extremely positive for Canada, and they should encourage that mining and that development and take the steps to do so.
Yeah, especially with, and say you don't even like the fiat conversation. I say this to people all the time. There's enormous amounts of even the battery energy metals, if that floats your boat, or copper, or anything of that nature, is that if we can convince our betters, kind of laughably call, to get behind this, and it always makes me scratch my head that you go, they must know I mean, that Canada is resource rich, and that we definitely, if they want to pull off their green plan, that requires, it's not a matter of we kind of need it. It's absolutely critical that they get these minerals and these metals out of the ground. Yes. And it seems to be a disconnect with the messaging, that they haven't really thought it through to go, well, wait a second. Yeah. How are we going to do that? How are we going to get all of this to create all the solar panels, to create the energy, to create all of this clean solutions if we don't have any of the metals and minerals that are required to do so for a battery or for anything for that matter? Yeah.
And, the big Canadian mining companies are ethical miners. Once they dig the stuff out of the ground, they put it back. They put the resources, the natural resources and landscape back to the way it was.
Yeah.
And so there's no disadvantage to mining. In fact, the resources are there for humanity to advance. And one of those resources, of course, is gold, which is nature's money. So hopefully we will, learn some of these basics once again, things that we've lost sight of in the 20th century, but were intuitive to people in the 19th century and before.
I think that's such a great message too, is that it's so easy with a lot of the noise. We're throwing information all day long. It's on Twitter, it's on social media, it's this, that, and most of it's just distracting. And if someone can just take a weekend, say over the holidays, it's a holiday season, and really sit down and turn a lot of the noise off and think to themselves, what does that actually mean to me? What do I really want my life to look like? I don't want to hear the opinions of this and that, and I can't travel and I can't do this. So what would you like your life to look like? Do you really want it to look like this? Or would you prefer that you have a bit more responsibility, you have some options, you have some ideas, and to really clarify that? And if they read your book, it's a good kind of primer to walk hand in hand to go, yeah, actually, these are very important considerations for me, because I don't like how I feel right now. No one seems to be terribly happy with the things that are moving in the direction we're going. That I think if everyone just takes the time and just thinks of those fundamental things within us and go, that's what I need. I require these things. And if I focus on those, from there, we can talk about the nuances of how we get done. But I need these things to feel fulfilled.
Yeah, that's good advice, Andrew. Really very good advice.
Well, thank you so much. And that was one of the great things from the book, was that it helped me to kind of take that step back and remember that liberty and that happiness is a byproduct of action, that we have to do things, which means I'm responsible. There's things I have to do today, not tomorrow. I can't just sit around thinking about it. I got to do it today and do and do and do. And then as a byproduct, I might feel happy and I might feel more connection with people, but it takes a lot of work and it's going to take some effort. And that means not handing over the responsibility to government. It means I have to do stuff today. And then hopefully you'll do stuff today. And that all together will create a better connectivity, a network, a neighborhood, a country, a state, whatever it is, but where we have that do mentality rather than handing it off.
That's well stated. That's how society has advanced throughout history. And that's how it's going to continue to advance.
Well, thanks so much, James. I really appreciate you taking the time. And once again, check out the book, check out the website, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you in the new year. I hope you have a great holiday season, and that we start next year off. It's going to be challenging, but with all great growth, there's always big obstacles and challenges.
Thank you, Andrew. I look forward to next year as well. I think it's going to be a good one for the precious metals, and best wishes for the year-end holidays.